time is now 5:30 p.m. on Wednesday, September 21st, 5:38 p.m. on Wednesday, September 21st, 2022, and this public meeting of the DC State Board of Education will come to order. The roll will now be called to determine the presence of a quorum. Interim Director Ju, would you please call the roll?
Yes, Dr. Sutter. Hold on one second. Representative Bernstad?
Present.
Representative Burgess? Representative Burgess? Representative Wages? Representative Wages? Representative Washington?
Present.
Representative Gasoy?
Present.
Representative Chang?
Present.
Representative Wattenberg?
Present.
Representative O'Leary?
Here.
Representative Parker?
Present.
Representative Sutter?
Present.
Representative Thompson?
Present.
Representative Reed? I see you, Representative Reed, but I didn't quite hear you. And Representative Patterson?
Present.
Madam President, you do have quorum.
A quorum has been determined, and the State Board will now proceed with the business portion of the meeting. Members, we have a draft agenda before us. Are there corrections or additions to the agenda? Seeing no changes, I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Thank you, Vice President Thompson. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Dr. Patterson. The motion having been properly moved and seconded, I will ask for the yeas and nays. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. The motion is approved. We now have the minutes of both our August 3rd and September 7th working sessions before us. Is there a motion to adopt these sets of minutes?
So moved.
Thank you, Dr. Patterson. Is there a second? Second. Thank you, Vice President Thompson. The motion being properly moved and seconded, is there discussion? Seeing no discussion, the motion is on adoption of the August 3rd and September 7th working session minutes. I'll ask for the yeas and nays. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. The motion is approved. Good evening. My name is Jessica Sutter, Ward 6 Representative and President of the State Board of Education. On behalf of the members of the District of Columbia State Board of Education, I want to welcome our guests and our viewing public to our first in-person meeting since the start of the COVID-19 pandemic. The last time we sat on this dais, some of us were together, and it was February 2020. Others of us were not yet on the board, so this is a very exciting evening. We are grateful and thankful to be back in the old council chambers for our Wednesday, September 21st public meeting. The State Board plans to continue this in-person posture for our public meetings, and for the first time tonight, we are trying out a hybrid posture. So tonight, as we deal with the inevitable technical difficulties that come with that, we thank you all for your patience and for working through it with us. The State Board holds its regularly scheduled public meetings on the third Wednesday of every month in the Old Council Chambers at 441 4th Street Northwest. This meeting is also being broadcast live via the District Knowledge Network and is also live streaming via the State Board's YouTube page at DC SBOE. Before I get into a discussion of the items on this evening's agenda, I want to take time to share and address just a few updates more generally about the State Board's work. First, I want to express my gratitude to Dr. Grant and the team at OSSI for recent briefings to the board on teacher data and PARCC scores. We appreciate the continued support your team is providing to schools and to educators as they work to support our students in recovery from learning loss and in all the effects of the pandemic that our students are still experiencing. I want to share with the public the ongoing importance of vaccinations for our young people. We are still working to make sure that all young people have all of their childhood vaccinations before the school year gets any farther ahead. There are vaccination clinics that continue to be offered at schools across the district, and COVID vaccines and boosters are available at designated COVID centers across all 8 wards. I also want to share that the board is working on a letter to the DC Education Research Collaborative, commonly known as the RPP, to outline priorities the board hopes that the Research Practice Partnership will include in its forthcoming research agenda. We look forward to completing that letter and to transmitting it later this month before the October meeting of that body to share things that the board would like to see included in the research that body will undertake over the next 5 years. The State Board is also pleased to be hiring a new staff member to add to our team. We currently have a position open for an education standards specialist to support the board's work in reviewing and preparing for the revision of learning standards across DC. If you or someone you know might be a good fit for that position, you can take a look on the DCHR website, on the State Board's social media accounts, or on LinkedIn to find that posting. Finally, the State Board will be hosting a back-to-school engagement event at Eastern Senior High School this coming Saturday, September 24th at 10:30 a.m. Members of the public can still sign up, and all of this information is also on the State Board's website and social media accounts at bit.ly/SBOE _2 and the word school. We look forward to seeing you all in person to share updates on the State Board's work and to engage directly with members of the public on topics of education governance, literacy, the DC School Report Card, and family engagement practices. On to the business elements of this evening's meeting. This will become part of the State Board's official record, and if you've already provided written comments to the board, those are on our website. If you, out in the public viewing, would like to speak at a future public meeting, please sign up on our website at sboe.dc.gov or contact our staff by email at sboe@dc.gov or by phone at 202-741-0888. Tonight we will hear from over 20 public witnesses and we'll have in-person panels of 4 and 1 virtual Zoom panel at the end. Every public witness will have 3 minutes to speak this evening. For those who have joined us in person, thank you. Please note that you must use the microphone at the table. The microphone is already on. The timer light will be green for the first 2.5 minutes of your testimony, will turn yellow for the last 30 seconds, and will turn red after 3 minutes have elapsed. For those of us who have joined virtually via Zoom, we'll begin with our in-person witnesses before shifting to all of you. When you speak on Zoom, there will be a timer on your screen if you set your view to gallery mode. After each panel of public witnesses speak, we will pause for questions from board members. Members will have 3 minutes for questions for our public witnesses. Those 3 minutes include their question, comment, and the answer. Mr. Ju will call the public witnesses as well as our question rounds. He will also assist with timing to ensure our witnesses and board members do not exceed their allotted time, but we will, likely again, manage some technical issues and offer grace as we do that. Mr. Ju, would you begin by asking in-person public witnesses to come forward to the table?
Thank you, President Sutter. Angela Hadley, Julia Jones, Spring Woodell, Rich Amenhat, Ben Williams, Lucia Cuomo, Sarah Cole, Gabrielle Dubois,
Excuse me, you called my name, I'm sorry. I didn't know the format. Rich, I'm in hat.
yes, sir, you can come to the table. Rianne Reed, all right, we will start with, from the left, we'll start with you, Mr. Williams.
Thank you. Good evening, State Board members. My name is Ben Williams. I'm a 12th grade government and history teacher at Capital City Public Charter School. And I'm here today because I'm very concerned about staffing shortages around the district. And I also want to weigh in on what I've seen and heard from students regarding student mental health and the upcoming community service requirements. I'd like to start by saying thank you to the board. I appreciate this elected body's work on the issue of teacher and educator retention over the last 4 years, and was heartened to see the OSSE report that expanded public information on the issue. I would like for this body to continue doing the necessary work of the public and continue to prioritize this. As a city, I believe that we need to pass the statewide Data Warehouse Amendment Act that was first introduced in 2019. I was talking with a parent yesterday from Cardozo High School, and she said her biggest concern is ensuring that her daughter receives relevant and engaging instruction. She said that keeping effective teachers is critical to making sure that kids are engaged. I think a big reason for this is building relationships and making sure that kids stay engaged from people that they know. Another parent that I talked to recently talked about how a veteran teacher helped her son stay focused on finishing high school, and how she worries that kids will fall through the cracks without stable learning environments. Way more can be done on this issue to improve working conditions for teachers and to make sure that we're keeping good teachers in our schools, and I'd like to use some of the time afterwards to explore what elected representatives think are the 1 or 2 things that could be done on this issue. I think it's critical for State Board of Education members to be clear on what solutions can work best to solve this crisis. With regards to school-based mental health, my point is simple. We don't have enough counselors for students right now. And according to anecdotal evidence, talking with 3 different counselors at 3 different schools, caseloads are higher than they've ever been, and some students who do not receive counseling on their IEPs are not able to see a counselor. That is, unless there's an emergency, but mostly there are challenges with lack of capacity. As a city, I think we need a better approach, and I'm curious how the State Board can use this position to improve the care that students receive. Finally, I'd like to advocate for a reduced and staggered community service requirement. As the board considers the recommendations from previous meetings, community service is important. And is that 30 seconds or am I done? Yes, 28, 20 seconds. Cool. And when done with fidelity, I think benefits the individual and the community. Yet I've seen that many students right now in getting back to this school year are incredibly stressed. The ones who have done the community service have already fulfilled this requirement, and the ones who haven't are still managing work responsibilities, scholarship applications, challenging courses, and just trying to find time to be a young adult. So I think a 50-hour requirement allows for students and the community to experience the positive impact while still being a student and young adult. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Williams. Mr. Du Bois, or Ms. Du Bois?
Greetings and salutations. Thank you for hearing my testimony tonight. We've heard talked a lot about student wellness. I'd also like to bring teacher wellness to the forefront, specifically with flexible scheduling and teacher wellness. I am Gabrielle DeBose, a teacher in D.C. and a teacher facilitator with Empower Ed, a teacher voice organization that helps teachers bring their solutions to the education establishment in the district. Tonight, I'm testifying to ask the State Board of Education to join with teachers and community supporters to urge the D.C. Council to resist being indifferent to flexible scheduling and the inclusion of wellness practices for D.C. schools. Flexibility and wellness are synonymous. The two experiences are inextricably linked. Access to these lifelines for education professionals must be respected and protected. Flexible scheduling is a tremendous tool that can lessen debilitating stress and anxiety and keep teachers in the profession. Stress and anxiety plague our classrooms, which can automatically obstruct a clear path to wellness and learning well. DCPS and public charter schools have averaged between 20 to 30% turnover for the past decade, significantly higher than the urban average of 16 to 19% annually. Support our initiative, demand that the D.C. Council find funding to add 25 schools each year to flexible scheduling pathways to support teacher wellness. Thanks in large part to COVID money accessible through an OSSE grant, Empower Ed is part of wellness work with 5 schools in the district. That work will expire at the end of this school year and disappear from reality without future funding. We see firsthand that DCPS and charter schools are experiencing the power of wellness. Everyone in the building, administration, teachers, counselors, SPED teachers, and support staff who engage in this important work are effectively collaborating to change the culture of their school. They're planning teacher-led PDs, planning mentoring observation cycles, creating wellness spaces in the building, planning whole staff art expressions, and the list goes on. They know their school and collaborate to bring everyone into a wellness space. Many schools are piloting these ideas, but they need funds to partner with organizations to keep the programs going. Tell the DC Council, please, to provide funding for the longevity of flexible scheduling and teacher wellness. Otherwise, it will be privileged schools that access private funding who will benefit. And we all know how those stories end. We are asking the SBOE to join us by urging the council to find the funds. Schools deserve the space to create work style and lifestyle practices and policies that diffuse the grip of anxiety. Anxiety harms the individual, work relationships, and ultimately the institutions themselves. Concerned community members in D.C. agree that it is time for D.C.'s education system to reimagine school environments, support teacher access to flexibility and wellness. Our fear is that D.C. will continue to lose teachers in record numbers if something is not done to stop the bleeding. We need the D.C. Council to ensure the funding. Otherwise, teacher loss will continue, and the students, our students, will suffer the consequences. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Reed?
Greetings, President Sutter and the State Board of Education members. My name is Ryan Reed, and I am a Ward 8 educator and Empower Ed Fellow. I'm also a proud school-wide enrichment teacher and a National Board Certified teacher in the area of exceptional needs. As we consider the great need to retain educators who are highly invested in the growth of our students, I find it important to urge the board to consider how we can celebrate educators on a more consistent basis. This looks like coming into schools like Kramer Middle School and learning more about the great things that we're doing. For example, this past Saturday, UDC came with over 60 volunteers who happen to be veterans and staff and students to and transform our garden in the front of our school. Thank you to Dr. Reed for stopping by. We appreciate you. And we would love to see more board members do the same. So, at Kramer Middle School, we are also centering joy. Educators use their own salaries to make sure that these enriching programs, like I mentioned before, are possible. Don't you think that we deserve at least a 12% increase, 5% bonus, or a retro pay? Educators who are using their connections within the community to bring in speakers and ensure sustainability of these programs happen every day. Don't you think we deserve student loan forgiveness? Educators seek out supports to address the varying degrees of trauma that our students experience and our staff members experience. Don't you think we deserve access to project-based learning and centering time for social emotional learning through increased planning time and smaller class sizes? So, distinguished board members, when you advocate for the needs of educators, remember to tell the story of the sacrifice as well as the joy. Tell the story of how educators provide virtual teaching supports to families for over 2 years, plus there was no increase in our pay or a fair contract. Tell the story of triumph, success, and the excellence, and of course the joy. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Rich Emenhart?
Rich Amenenhat.
Amenenhat. Thank
Yes,
you.
Yes. Okay, my topic is racial equity. In the 1400s, Pope Nicholas declared that every Native American worldwide, lightest skin brown to darkest skin brown, was black of soul, black of spirit, devoid of, what could we say, being saved. In 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue under the papal bull, the Pope dictate of Pope Nicholas and others, with the mandate to enslave, to steal, to take. Fast forward to the 1800s at Göttingen or Göttingen University, Göttingen, Germany, they developed a system of racism. The hierarchy of racism from bottom to top was black. Added in these days is brown, but then back then it was red. Then there was yellow, and of course the superior race, white. Today in 2022, the media, this state board, nationally, internationally, still uses race labels as if that is something that's great. Like, don't remove all the cancer, let some of the cancer stay, and maybe we'll get better, as opposed to looking at human beings as human civilized beings. They want to help white children feel not white guilt. Well, stop teaching them that they're white. Their skin isn't white. So what's white is the mindset that we instill in them. We tell our kids, we raise our kids, use your words. From very young, use your words. And then we get to the goal line and we punt. We don't come up with words that recognize and that are directly related to the reality that we want to create in the world, as Gandhi would say. Why? We don't celebrate the African of the African American. There's a board back there of these Native Americans, dark brown, lightest brown. Those cultures of the different places around the world in Australia and et cetera are not celebrated. Why? Because it's just black, it's void. On the other hand, if it's not void, it's white, and it's guilt, as opposed to looking at civil humanity. We cannot have racial equity until we start looking at civil humanity.
Thank you very much. We will now turn to member questions. I'm going to turn to Representative Reed, who's joining via Zoom first, to see if she has any questions for the panel.
Thank you for taking the time to come in to testify. This question is for Ms. Reed. Good to see you on Saturday. I know your testimony is related to teacher pay as well as the joy that children are experiencing at Kramer. But I do want to get some of our conversation on the record related to budget. As one of the there was just an education hearing I was telling you about related to budget, and I think your comments from your colleague were key. Can you elaborate or briefly talk about some of the influx that you experience of students throughout the year, those key points of the key times of year where you see increases of students come into DC public schools? And I'll also open up to also the panel, because I see some educators there.
All right, thank you for your question. So this weekend we were discussing about the times when we get an influx of students because they're coming from charter for a lot of reasons. Sometimes the students come around testing time, and then we have to, we really didn't have an opportunity to educate them through our doors, but we have to test them. So they go on our books for that. And then around October, we also get more students in an influx.
And I also heard you said spring around park testing time. You
Yes.
see an increase. Anyone else? Got it. Anyone else want to weigh in? Yeah.
Not necessarily. I haven't really seen that in numbers at Duke Ellington, but I would not be surprised that there is some element of that as well. especially closer to like part-time, when we have received some students in, but not in large numbers.
I don't have anything additional to add based on what Ms. Du Bois and Ms. Reed said.
Thank you, and I yield the remaining of my time.
Thank you, Representative Reed. I'll now turn to our student representatives to see if they have any questions. Representative Bernstead?
Good evening. I think I have two questions, but I'll ask them both at the same time. I was wondering, Ms. Du Bois, if you could talk more about just like what schedule flexibility meant, because I'm not sure I'm completely clear on what that means, but I get what you're talking about with teacher wellness. And then I think this question is for everyone, but maybe specifically Mr. Williams and Ms. Du Bois. Have you noticed a connection between increase or decrease in counselors and teacher wellness?
Okay, thank you for both your questions. I'll start with flexible scheduling, and I appreciate that because oftentimes it seems like very abstract, and so we need to bring it into where it is a concrete situation where we can actually plan flexible scheduling. So on school campuses, for example, it can look like, well, during quarantine, when we had the Wednesdays where classes were not meeting, and so teachers had a chance to meet with students on those Wednesdays and actually create small group learning and one-to-one sessions to help our children recover from any learning loss that was happening. It was also a day where teachers could meet with parents that were more accessible on those Wednesdays during the daytime, having virtual meetings. Now that we're back in person, it can look like within the hours of the day, giving teachers the time to do the mentor observing of other teachers in the building so that newer teachers can learn from veteran teachers. So flexible scheduling means that we're not trying to mandate every teacher and every student into a box because that's not how humans learn best. And so one thing quarantine did teach us during COVID is that when we are flexible with what we produce as humans, the quality is still good. And so what the beauty of flexible scheduling and wellness is that it gives the teachers, it gives the administration, the campuses a chance to look at what particular flexible scheduling model works for their campus, for their student population who they know best, and they know those that are furthest from opportunity that can benefit from flexibility within the teacher's schedule and the students as well.
Okay, thank you. And then my second question, this is kind of for anyone, but specifically I'm thinking, have you noticed a connection between increased or decreased counselors and teacher wellness?
Yeah, I can go first on that. Thank you for the question. I would add on to what Ms. Du Bois said that by giving schools the autonomy to implement flexible scheduling, there are a lot of different models that can still be explored, but looking at, 75% of a teacher teaching can free them up to be able to meet other needs in the schools or meet other needs within the job. And that teachers are at different places in their career, right? So being able to take someone who's taught 5 years versus 10 years versus, 40 years can leverage expertise in different ways that can be really useful. To your question, I think in terms of school culture, like whether or not a school promotes like caring for their teachers, teachers understand that. So like just teachers need to know where the resources exist and then also kind of have, I think, time valued because workload is one of the main reasons that teachers are leaving the profession. So if we are able to balance the workload and make sure that teachers have a menu of options that they can pursue independently, I imagine there would be particular research that would support that that's helpful for managing mental health. And then Empower Ed also has a variety of educator wellness programs that have been effective so far in supporting particular school communities.
Okay, that's my time. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Washington?
Hi, good evening. I had like 2 questions or comments for Mr. Menenhat. I was wondering if you could please clarify or restate your main points, and then from a policy perspective, what can the board do to support the solution to your aforementioned issues? Oh no, I was saying, could you please clarify and restate your main points? Yes, sorry. And then from a policy perspective, what can the board do to support the solution to your aforementioned issues?
So in Latin, the word for black is after white, after yellow, after red, after the new brown race, and then black. And that's how these people are treated. And so, as a person thinks, and we keep calling them black and black and black and void and black. So that's that point right there. We can easily recognize that we are brown people, beautiful brown people, beautiful pastel peach people, beautiful tan people. We need to start being in reality of who we are, where our culture are from, and celebrate those things. And then the second part of it.
From a policy yes.
From a policy standpoint, it starts with, there's been a fight going on since the 1700s with the U.S. Census of utilizing race labels to segregate people. And within our schools, kids are automatically segregated at preschool based on white, black, right? They've kind of erased the yellow and the red, but as a policy, we as a people need to put more pressure on the U.S. Census to change those race labels, change the words so that we can start putting in ideologies and ideas of unity, humanity, civility. Thank you for your questions.
Yeah, thank you for your time. And that was all.
Thank you, Representative Washington. Representative Wages, did you have any questions? Okay. Right now, we will move to Representative O'Leary. Questions?
Yes. Y'all followed up on this ESSER conversation about these billions of dollars that are out there. And I know that all of you feel the pressure of being a teacher and not being paid equitably. And that money that is going to the schools can't pay your salary, all right? But it can be used for flexibility of scheduling. It can be used for altering the community service requirements. It can be used for a lot of things in the building that need to be fixed, because no one's mentioned how many of our buildings in the district at the beginning of school, when they had all summer to work on the HVAC systems and the water and all these other things, haven't been fixed. And those monies can be used for that. Or they can be used to force the city council to make sure that they're fixed. Because when you're talking about flexibility of scheduling, which is incredibly important, but it's something that goes against the grain of traditionalism. Nobody wants to fix anything. We had all this time during the pandemic to change education in the District of Columbia. And when everyone went back into the classroom, all they were looking for is go back to the old styles. And that's not working. Okay, so how can we help you do that?
Numbers have their place, and I'm not really impressed with numbers. in terms of teachers creating learning environments to meet students where they are, we can say that all day long and twice on Sunday, but it takes time for teachers to have the space and place and room to create those moments to meet students where they are. You can't pull it out of a hat. And so with all the mandates on teachers, it works completely against the purpose and intent of teachers who are there to teach with purpose. Further, with regards to the money and how it can help us in the schools, to pay contracting partner organizations that want to come into the school and maybe, embark the kids upon internships and project-based learning. Those kinds of things is where the schools can really use that money to contract with community members so that we can really work together, because the focus should be the child. It should be the children and not the bureaucracy. It should be the children.
Thank you. I'll yield the rest of my time.
Thank you, Representative O'Leary. We're going to move to Representative Wattenberg.
Hi. I have a quick question for Mr. Williams and then a broader one. The quick one for Mr. Williams is on community service. As you know, we're talking about it, and I was very happy to hear Superintendent Grant talk about the different ways in which there's going to be discussion about how to alter the requirements and make them more possible to meet for students that have other competition for their time. What I don't think I heard was that they should be reduced, and I know there were people on the board that did think they should be reduced, and I know that was a recommendation from before, and I think you were saying that, so I just want to give you 30 seconds to say something about that, if I understood that right.
Yes, I do think they should be reduced right now. I think we're kind of coming back from a place where, especially for this senior class, this is the first time they've know what it's like to be in the building for over 2.5 years, and half of their high school education was online. So I think that, kind of coming back and just making sure that they have time to be able to do the other community events.
I'm going to interrupt,
Yeah,
because
sorry.
that's part of staggering it, so
Right.
that's fine. I think there's really broad agreement on that. What about after the pandemic's over? Should we be reducing the number of hours in the long run? I've heard that from a lot of people in the past, so.
That's a good question. I'm not 100% sure how I feel about that right now, so
Okay.
thank you, though.
That's fine.
I'll definitely give it more thought.
All right, then my next question is Mr. Bose, which is just this in terms of your promoting the flexible scheduling legislation, or that you hope will become legislation in front of the council. And my understanding of it was that it was mainly to give teachers time off, but the way you're talking about it is much more about changing the way teachers use their hours in the day. So I wanted to give you a chance. You've got 1 minute and 6 seconds.
Okay, I promise I won't go over that time. So no, I think it's a misnomer to think that flexible scheduling is to afford teachers with time off. Teachers don't have time off. I've been teaching since Jesus walked the earth for over 30 years. I take work home with me all the time. I take kids home with me in my mind, in my heart, and in my spirit, and my soul all the time. So flexible scheduling affords teachers the time to think and to breathe and to create environments, again, where kids can learn. And so the flexible time within my school day will allow me to be the educator that I've always been, and to help train newer teachers to understand what it means to actually meet children where they are. So it's not time off. We wouldn't be on the sofa eating bonbons. We would be working still, but not have mandates on us that take us out of what our purpose and intent is to be in the building in the first place.
I know your first name is Ryan. I'm sorry I can't say your last name. Do you want to take 2 seconds?
Okay.
Yes, so Kramer Middle School does have a flexible schedule. So when I was talking about the board members coming, it's because we do have a lot of those things already in place, and we would love support and for you to know how it works and how it doesn't work.
Thank you. Representative Patterson.
Thank you. First and foremost, thank you, Representative Wattenberg, because I had pretty much the same question. I wanted a little bit clarity on the flexibility. But thank you guys for providing that. And secondly, I want to thank each and every one of you educators who are continuously to be dedicated to our children after such a pandemic. I have a daughter that's an educator. I talk to her every day. I know your job is very difficult. It's a job that I don't have the ability to do, so I have so much respect for each and every one of you guys who still stay on the job and promise to be an advocate for you guys. What I would like to ask is to kind of take this back to what we had before you, the panel before you. Are you really feeling any of the funding that's coming through the ESSER dollars in your respective classrooms at your schools? And if so, could you tell me how? Because we just had a great panel that came up before us and talked about all this ESSER money that's being spent or not being spent. I want to know from you as an educator in a classroom, are you feeling any of it?
No.
And I appreciate short answers as well, so thank you.
No.
I was literally thinking the same thing, so I'll just say no as well.
It's been a long time. Okay, so my last major professional job was as a educational liaison with Gallup in Los Angeles, doing the state curriculum and things of the sort. And I was a liaison for consistency management, which was a program that looked at making the classroom setting and the school run efficiently, consistently. And we're at a state board meeting, and we're talking about the usage of the money, and that the money can't be used to pay teachers for this and that and that. Who votes on that? Who makes those stipulations? Who advocates to be able to use that money in a way that's productive to give teachers the leeway to be able to be more flexible, that they can better help the children? Who does that? And if we know who does that, we need to hold those people accountable and make those funds available.
I think I have a answer similar to what you guys are. We don't get to make that decision. We would like to have more input into that, but we don't make that decision.
But we know who does.
Right.
We know who does.
But again, I appreciate each and every one of you guys for what you do every single day and the dedication to our families in the district.
Because no, they're not.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Patterson. Representative Parker, any questions?
No questions.
All right. Representative Gasoy, I believe. Representative Gasoy?
Sorry, goofing off. No, not really. Thank you for being here, and thank you for everything you do. So I will start with you, Ms. Du Bois, with the flexible scheduling again. Can you explain what the funding is needed for? Is it staff? What is it?
I honestly think it's going to be an array of staff, resources, community partners. Again, I want to go back to a point I tried to make earlier, which is every school's campus is different. And so if I think Ben mentioned a menu that is possible, a menu of choices where schools can choose where the flexible schedule would most benefit their campuses. I think we want to be careful about nailing it down to only 5 particular or 4 particular areas, because that may have us circle back to where we were before. So being flexible and being able to be flexible with the hours over the course of the school day, or the number of school days over the week, or bringing in community partners, creating more outdoor learning spaces, those kinds of things, flexibility, and not always having to be inside the schoolhouse for every single lesson. So flexibility is one of those things, again, it's like an abstract noun that's out there, and so it will take time to actually put it into credible terms to make it more tangible for each particular campus.
Okay, so I just want to say back, make sure I understand what you're saying is the funding would be used differently by different schools based on how they define how they define the needs related to, okay, good. Also, just a clarifying question. I know that this advocacy is based on input you all collected from educators in DC. Was the question specifically what will make you stay? Or do you know that? What was
One of the
question?
questions we did put out to the community was, how should DC retain good teachers? Because we are losing teachers. And so the Teachers' Day came into the conversation from community members because they acknowledged that there's a lot, after, quarantine, when people had their kids at home and had to teach them, they understood more intimately the job of a teacher. So they appreciate the fact that teachers need assistance and support. And they understood that without that, teachers will be doing exactly what we're seeing right now, leave the profession. So yes, a lot of the questions we put to the community had to deal with teacher retention, and flexible scheduling came out of those conversations, their comments.
Okay. So again, I'm just clarifying that the advocacy around flexible scheduling is specifically in response to, or it's a way of retaining teachers, or
Yes.
one way. Okay. Thank you.
Yes.
Representative Chang.
Thank you for testifying. I also yield my time.
Thank you. I think that brings us to Vice President Thompson.
I keep thinking it's my go. I keep thinking it's my go, and it's not my go. I actually had, so two things. I had a similar question to Representative Gasoy, because I think I'm struggling to understand. I understand the argument for flexible scheduling, and I'm trying to understand like the cost increase, right? Like, because I do know that a lot of schools do have partners who come in during the day, and we pay people to do a lot of things. And so I'm wondering, is it an increase in the number of partners and the number of services, or is it that we actually need to do things differently? And so, yeah, I'm curious. I want to understand, because if asked, I need to be able to answer.
Yeah, 100%. And in full transparency, I'm still in the process of figuring it out too.
Yeah, okay.
I think that I wouldn't want to devalue staffing, right? So if you have, part of it is to avoid teacher burnout. So if you have a teacher who wants to be able to teach instead of 2 preps, 1 prep, the school is going to need to hire someone else or make sure that they have a that class staffed. If a school is having a principal, an assistant principal that is also taking on an instructional coach role, or is also taking on a scheduling role and is wearing 3 hats because teachers are overstretched, then the money can be used to make sure that the workload for people is appropriate and targeted, and then they can bring on more people to divide roles for what should be a normal workload. So, I mean, I don't think it's just for staffing, but I do think that staffing is a critical part of this, and I think it goes hand in hand with improving school culture, because one of the main problems is that, even if you have the money, right, to improve staffing and hire more people, if you don't make schools attractive, then you're not going to, be able to hire people, and we're seeing a lot of places even struggle just to fill positions right now. So I think it's got to be a comprehensive approach, and I think this is one thing that, teachers in the world saw so many people be able to work in different ways, and we want to be able to have education evolve in that way too.
Yeah, so I guess and I'm happy to talk offline about this. I'm less confused about the why, right? Like my mom was a teacher up until the end of last year. She retired. I'm less confused about the why. I'm more confused about getting the mechanics right. And I'm also curious about why it has to be legislated.
What part do you think has to be legislated?
No, I thought it would. I heard in the testimony it said support the legislation before the council. Did I hear wrong?
To support the funding to, and that was part of my testimony, to support the funding for flexible scheduling and wellness, teacher wellness.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
And may I take like 5 seconds? Just 5 seconds?
No, because I'm out of time. I got to yield. But somebody else might loan some time.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. That was 5 seconds I could have did.
I think Representative Wages actually had a question, so I'm going to turn to him first.
Okay, Okay, I have a question for Mr. Williams. So I heard you when you first got up, to the panel, I heard you talking about community service, right? So, just in case the community service hours do not get adjusted to 50, do you think there's anything that we can do? I've been informed that there are a good amount of community service hours, community service opportunities to earn, I'm so sorry. There are a lot of opportunities to earn community service hours, but it isn't well broadcasted. Do you think this is true? And if so, how do you think we can spread the broadcast?
It's a great question. I think that it's going to look different in different schools, but I do think it needs to be like focus. I think that some schools have a particular coordinator for like internships. Our school has like advisors, so the role will fall particularly on like an advisor to make sure everyone has a plan. I think that students like obviously still need to stay responsible for meeting that requirement, like it's an individual responsibility, but I think like college counseling offices can do a lot to be able to make sure that people can go in and just see what nonprofits are located near the school, and then the school should be able to like work with the surrounding community so that like community service is meaningful. You know, like part of it is just figuring out what needs are and what is meaningful work that can be done. So I agree with your main point, though, that I think the resources need to be centralized. Students need to be able to know who they can go to talk to, but it shouldn't just solely fall, because some students are motivated, right? So some students need that kind of push in that relationship to figure out what will be a good use of their time.
Any other questions, Representative? Okay. President Sutter?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Williams, for raising the community service question, and thank you to our students for engaging on this already. I will say I am pleased that when Dr. Grant met with Vice President Thompson and I, we talked a lot about this question of the qualitative nature of what are we allowing students to count and how has it been communicated from the state level? What counts as community service? So like, if I serve at my church, community service. If I sing in the choir, could it be community service? Are there ways that we could better explain to students what it is to be deeply engaged with your community and how that might be able to be counted? So I'm very excited for the ongoing conversation. Ms. Reed, I actually wanted to give you some time to talk to us about what the flexible scheduling looks like at Kramer, because I'm in the same boat as Vice President Thompson, which is like, I'm 100% there for it. And I'd love to hear a little bit about how it's currently being piloted at Kramer.
Okay. So currently, every single Monday, the students have an opportunity at 1:20 to participate in different activities with community partners. But also throughout that day, teachers have the day off or time to participate in more collaborative planning, in completing IEPs, all the different tasks that they might not be able to do throughout the week. They have that time on Mondays, and the students themselves participate in town halls. We also have a new program, kind of like, you know, hives, where, you know how Harry Potter has different houses? So we have that system at Kramer now. So they do the hive games, and in town halls, they also have SEL work. We're bringing in, like, students from Howard University to come and speak to our students about self-care and wellness. So we do those kinds of things on Mondays, as well as give the teachers time for collaborative planning, et cetera, and LEAP and all the different requirements that we have.
Thank you so much, Ms. Reed.
And that's just one example of what it could look like. Some of my other ideas that we don't have currently, but I think would be beneficial, is to have students as co-curricular designers of what learning should look like for them, to make sure that we're increasing our innovation in what we offer to the kids.
I so appreciate that, and I know we all on the board get smarter all the time when our students are involved in the work. Ms. DuBose, one question I have for you, and we can follow up offline if we run out of time. How might that look differently in a high school setting?
I really appreciate what Ms. Reed was sharing. I would say that, again, I'm going to go back to the Wednesdays when we had that going on during quarantine, and that Wednesday can be used in similar fashion for teachers to be able to collaborate, scaffolding curriculum together. and have the flexibility to be able to actually get that work done and also bringing in the outside groups to work with the students as well on the Wednesday because they're not in the regular classes. So that Wednesday was very beneficial to high school students and teachers and families at that time. The funding issue that I brought up was with regards to the wellness. So when I start off with my testimony, I talked about flexible scheduling and how flexible scheduling and wellness go together. So being able to work with schools, being able to work with outside groups like Empower Ed, having the budget to do that, to create wellness environments within their school. That's where the budget issue came in with regards to my testimony tonight, not really flexible scheduling.
Thank you all.
Thank you all. We will move to our next round of public witnesses. We appreciate you being here this evening. Senorita Lake, Dominique Moore, Karen Caskert, Laura Fuchs, Dana Richard,
Witnesses, before you begin, we're hearing from DC Cable Television that they're not always able to hear folks, so if you speak as close to the microphone as you can, we'll be sure that your questions are also picked up by the folks watching from home.
We'll begin with you. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. I know it's been a long night, so I'm going to see how fast I can get through this. Good evening. My name is Karen Caskert. I am a DC resident and a DCPS employee. Thank you all for your time this evening. Many of my colleagues and community members around will speak about the need for a new WTU collective bargaining agreement. As part of that, many people will talk about compensation. I'm totally in agreement that compensation matters. But for the sake of your time tonight, I'd like to talk about some other things in the contract that can benefit both teachers and, as a result, students in the District of Columbia. First of all, I'd like to point out that I graduated from college almost 20 years ago, and this contract reads as though I was still in college, with lines such as the chancellor and the president of the WTU will agree to work cooperatively to ensure that each teacher has a computer. Now, we'll have a computer, but they'll work on it, right? It also states that we will create an instructional technology plan that will include strategies to acquire a sufficient number of computers for student use. Not every student will have a computer, not will work to one-to-one or two-to-one, but we'll come up with a plan that maybe a student will have an an opportunity to play Oregon Trail on an Apple once a week, right? The contract needs a lot of help. 5 things that I'd like to bring to your attention that I think could be advocated for that would benefit DCPS as a whole, including the educators and the students. Number 1, as I started with, increased technology training, and ongoing support for teachers, which would also benefit students. There should not be a technological divide between schools in the district, and there is. There is a technological divide between what is provided to different teachers and what is provided to students, and the WTU collective bargaining agreement is one way that we could eliminate that. The word email is currently not written in our contract, neither is social media. There's nothing for teachers in either one of those. Once again, this contract needs to be focused on. Number 2, promote safety and facilities. Referring back to what Representative O'Leary said earlier, the safety in schools today is a huge issue. Why is that not a huge topic of conversation for our contract? That is oops, I am needing to hurry up. Also facilities, we should have HVAC, we should have keys. Number 3, recruit and retain teachers. Put things in there like teachers can have their children go to the schools in which they teach. That would win over a lot of teachers for retention. Also promote DC residency within DCPS. A sad little note, bereavement for teachers is only 4 days a year. I've lost more than 4 students in a year and was not able to take leave to properly mourn those students because of my bereavement. Number 5, be responsive to our community's our student community and our needs. There is nothing in our contract about ESL, ELL, ELL, or emerging bilinguals, not even in the contract. Our contract also mentions zero tolerance. We know that that's an outdated policy. We also serve, DCPS serves approximately 46,000 at-risk students. We know these students need additional counselors, social workers, et cetera, and we are not, and that is not taken into account in our contract. So apologies for speeding through the end of that, but hopefully I gave you all some like practical things that we really need in DCPS along with our contract, and thank you for your time.
Thank you. Ms. Fuchs?
Hello. Okay. Firstly, the Washington Teachers Union deserves a fair contract now. Unions and DCPS have faced relentless pushback and delay from the mayor and her team that has resulted in out-of-date contracts that do little to support educators in doing their work with students. Clearly, mayoral control has failed us in every way possible. Knowing full well that the DC SBOE has no formal power to secure us a contract, I'm here today to make sure educator voices are heard. All of us are sick and tired of being neglected and ignored. Look at the CSO union, who have now secured a 12% raise and have been offered to be paid for hours they work outside their contract, something all teachers have to do with zero offers of compensation. Look at AFSCME and our teacher aides, who are making poverty-level wages but performing extremely valuable work for our students. Young and aspiring teachers need our support. How do we expect them to stay when they see how they are being treated by the district? All of us are reaching our breaking points. Losing teachers to other districts is becoming the norm. Losing teachers mid-year has already begun. Enough is enough. Now is the time for the community to come together. Demand that our district do better by our teachers. Mayor Bowser needs to treat all her workers with respect. All elected leaders need to use their power to amplify the call. You cannot sit idly by. Only by standing together can we demand the changes we deserve. Reach out to the mayor's office directly and tell her that our educators in DCPS deserve a fair contract now. Argue to the chancellor, OSCE superintendent, and the DME that we cannot continue down the path we are on and expect different results. Lift up the voices of our educators and demand that the mayor participate in mediation in good faith. Correct the wrongs of the past and ensure that we have the time and resources we need to serve our students. Otherwise, we will continue to see the district hemorrhage good educators who look for their respect in neighboring districts or other professions entirely. Nothing is more important than a classroom teacher. That is what we hear ad nauseum when it comes to teaching and learning, and yet we are consistently treated with disrespect from those in power. Time for a new era. Realize that our power has always been in our labor, and currently educators are just walking away. Our call is for you to stand with us and demand a fair contract now. Listen to your educators. We need your help.
Thank you, Ms. Fuchs. Mr. Richard?
Does that work? Is that on? Good evening, President Sutter, Superintendent Grant, board members, and student representatives of the board. Dana Richard, Ward 4, a member of the DC Mayor's Advisory Committee on Developing Girls Scholastic Wrestling Programs and an advocate for DCPS schools and athletics. I'm here 2022, 50th anniversary of federal Title IX, to testify in support of a state board resolution urging full sponsorship of DCPS girls scholastic wrestling teams. This is in the inaugural 2022-23 official season of wrestling as a DCPS-sponsored sport. By operation of at least local Title IX laws and under the circumstances, wrestling was to be reintroduced as a DCPS girls team championship and varsity sport. However, it was recently discovered DCPS neglected to fund or plan for DCPS girls wrestling teams in the inaugural season. Uncorrected, this would set a terrible precedent potentially delaying DC girls teams for years. Girls sports do matter. In 2015, the DC mayor signed into law the DC Athletic Equity Act of 2015. The Education Committee report sets forth its purpose: to improve the District of Columbia's low athletic participation rates, particularly for girls, and inequitable programmatic offerings. Following passage of the act, in 2017, DCPS reinstated to DCPS middle schools 3 missing sports: wrestling, swimming, and lacrosse, initially and appropriately planning each as girls' team and championship sports grades 6 through 12. In February 2022, DCPS announced the return of high school wrestling, but with no mention of or funding for girls' teams. Given it's 2022, it could not possibly be due to ignorance of the status of wrestling as a girls' team sport. It does reveal a continuing gross gender inequity in DCPS sports programming. DC was planning to reintroduce wrestling in 2022 as a boys' sport, a co-ed sport, meaning a few girls practicing but not necessarily competing, and then only against boys. No budget or plan for girls' teams. Yet there are enough DCPS schools participating in wrestling to establish girls' wrestling leagues and girls' competition schedules. Can I briefly?
You are over time, Mr. Richard.
Out of time.
At this time, I'm going to turn to Representative Reed to see if she has any questions. Hold on one second, Representative Reed. Okay, Representative Reed? Yes.
Awesome. Mr. Richard, I don't mean to give you any homework, but if you don't mind, could you submit that statement that you read?
Yes.
Could you? Thank you. I'm having audio, but I thought I heard Title IX, Equity in Girls Sports, and I want to make sure I can read it. So if you can submit that, I appreciate it. Thank you so much. That's it.
Okay, thank you, Representative Reed. To the student representatives, Representative Bernstead.
Hi, thank you so much for your testimony tonight. I have a question for Teacher Fuchs. Part of my ignorance, are paraprofessionals included in the teacher contracts?
They're not. They're in AFSCME, so they are in a separate local. So there's 4 different unions that work in DCPS. Teamsters do janitorial and or custodial and the cafeteria. AFSCME does our office workers as well as our paraprofessionals and aides. CSO is all the admin, and then WTU does pretty much all the teachers, social workers, counselors.
And substitute teachers are?
They're not in any union. They're currently trying to join the WTU, but I'm not really sure as to the status of that. It's kind of a complicated process.
Okay, that was just my question. Thank you for your time.
Representative Washington.
Hi, I had a question for Ms. Casakert. Can you please give an example of what promoting safety in schools looks like? Because I know DCPS has already adopted programs to inform students about topics surrounding safety, like the 3 R's program, which is focused around sexual health and consent and things of that nature. And we already have like mandated fire drills. So what would your ideal approach to these issues be? Would it be in the form of like a one-time lecture or a mandated class?
Sure. Thank you for the question. So there's a few things. I think number one, I do see using the WTU contract as a way of enforcing and holding DGS to a higher standard. And one huge thing, as someone who has been through many lockdowns at schools, and we know, yesterday was a rough day for a lot of schools across the country, having working PA systems, having working radios. I was at a school where we waited 3 months for the radios to be synced so that they could actually be used in a school. And so those are some of the things. having appropriate communication, having, yes, actually enforcing the drills that we're supposed to have, having sufficient training for security guards, having sufficient training for our behavior staff, so our deans, our behavior techs, et cetera. Additionally, continuing to train educators in de-escalation techniques and how to model or how to prevent a lot of issues. Another thing that we don't really want to talk about but also exists in DC is gang violence. And it is very difficult right now to get gang violence prevention workers in the schools to help people identify when students are being recruited for gangs, when students are entering into gangs, how we can help students exit the gangs. So those are just some of my ideas for safety, but I think we're going to run out of time soon.
Thank you.
Representative Wages.
Y'all can hear me? Oh, okay. I want to pose a question to Ms. Kaskert. You mentioned briefly that you feel like teachers should be able to have their children inside the building with them, right? Like attend the same school that they work in. How do you think this will work? Can you elaborate on that? Because in my opinion, I feel that it won't be very beneficial. I mean, it will be beneficial in some ways, but it'll also cause another hazardous problem because I know that it is dangerous in schools and kids often have various scuffles in the building, and parents come up to the school and the first thing they think about is defending their children. And so it will interfere with their work, the place they work at, which is their job, and the child's ability to be in the school. So how do you think that will work? I just don't see it as working.
That's a really great question. Thank you for it. I do want to start by saying I don't have children, so I would want to defer this to someone who does. But I did bring that idea from another WTU member who said that this would lead to her staying in DC schools longer. I do think, to your point, that goes back to the security question and how we train teachers in de-escalation and conflict resolution and things like that, because I have seen that as an issue, but I think there is training and such that can go into preventing that problem. But I also think that lots of our schools are large enough that there's not going to be a whole lot of interaction between the student and the parent potentially. But I wanted to raise it as a point that was brought up by other WTU members that said that if they could have preferential treatment for their student to be in the same school, it would allow them, for example, to get to school on time. I have 2 coworkers who have struggled to make it on time because they're waiting for their child to get picked up by a bus, or because, before care doesn't open until the same time that the teacher's supposed to be at work, and you can't be dropping your child off at the same time that you're arriving at work. Same thing with pickup, same thing with vacations and such, making sure that those are all synced, et cetera.
Anything else?
I do have a brief thing to say. Do you think that even like a good amount of training, you think that will actually work? Because when you're a parent, the first thing that comes to mind when regarding your children, you want to protect them. So do you think that all that training goes out of? Do you think all of that training goes out of the window as soon as something happens regarding somebody's kid, or do you think it will actually be beneficial and they will consider the training over their children in a moment? What do you think?
I mean, I think I would hope that most teachers would not want to get involved in a fight involving students. I get that we want to support our students and protect them, but we are, trained not to actually engage in the fight. So if something were to happen, hopefully yes, training and maybe making sure there are just kind of additional, that the teacher with a student in the school is being talked to. But I don't think, I'd be surprised, I guess, honestly, if it was a big issue for teachers. And if it is, then there's a lot of work that maybe we have to do together with our fellow educators to make sure that we are maintaining our professional standards.
Thank you, Representative Wages. Representative O'Leary.
Thank you all for coming. I really appreciate it. The leaders of the city for the past 2.5 years have been praising educators for their professionalism and dedication and competence. And now the teachers are the only public servants in the city without a contract and they're working without a living wage. So respect seems to have flown out the window once schools opened this year. And now the leaders are in denial of all of the things that happened in the last 2.5 years. I mean, you know where I'm coming from because I was a teacher forever. But there are so many things wrong right now with the schools and their facilities. You mentioned some of them at Woodson. I know that that's happening at Woodson. And your voices are not going to be not heard here. And we will be fighting for you, but the system needs to react positively to the fact that they've lost more teachers last year than ever before. And that it's because of the lack of support, both financial and physical support in the buildings. What can we do to help you?
I mean, right now we're in mediation, so like a clock has started ticking, and the problem that we have is that if the mayor does not negotiate in good faith with her team in that mediation process, and she decides to just automatically reject what we bring, which is what we suspect is bound to happen, it's going to go to an arbitrator. At that point, it removes voices like Karen's and mine from the process 100%. Part of that's on our union, but a lot of that's on the district. And it'll mean that the arbitrator gets to decide for us. There's no vote. We don't get any voice at all in our contract. It'll just get decided by an arbitrator. So we just need people to put pressure on the mayor that that's not an acceptable outcome. That's what DCPS has signaled that they want. They did it before the process even began, and it's not acceptable. W2 members should be allowed to read the contract and vote on it, but she's probably not going to allow her team to negotiate in good faith in that space. And it's going to push it to an arbitrator and remove members entirely from having a voice in their contract. And that's not acceptable. And so we need people to tell them that.
Thank you.
And
my time
just
is up.
very quickly, the fact that there is nothing agreed upon at this point does indicate that there was a lack of good faith from the beginning.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Representative Wattenberg.
Thank you. I keep going to the mic when it's Representative Washington, and then I don't go when it, anyway, I've been confused, but okay. First of all, thank you very much to those of you from WTU for coming here and giving us such a clear list of what some of the issues are. I want to say I think it's a great idea to be able to use the contract as a way to enforce some of these safety issues and health issues. I've been to so many schools, as has everybody up here, I believe, where HVAC has not been working. And it's terrible. I mean, and I've heard from teachers directly, the HVAC goes out, the teachers get COVID, and then they're out. It's terrible at every level. I've also been talking to others, and Representative Thompson and I were actually interviewed yesterday about some of the safety problems in the schools. You mentioned the PAs. I've also seen the doors that don't lock, the security cameras that don't work. So I think this can be a very useful, constructive thing for the city. So that's number one. There's two things I wanted to raise. One is it may be of interest to others to explain why it is that you have a contract that can only go to arbitration. How does it work in other places? So let me throw that out. And then the second thing that I think people don't understand is in terms of the teacher evaluation, that we are really the only city in the country, district in the country, maybe there's a couple, but mainly where a poor evaluation leads so directly to termination. And people may first hear that and say, well, if you're a poor teacher, you probably should be terminated. And in some cases, maybe yes, but part of what it does is it allows for enormous pressure because a lot of the evaluation, most of it, all of it for most teachers is totally subjective. So it puts an enormous amount of pressure on the teachers to go about what they're asked to do. And a lot of people have tied it to the graduation scandal that we had and the suspension scandal that we had, because people in the schools didn't feel like they had the freedom to push back. So pick one of those and just say other things that people like.
So I guess just on the first one, it's not that we automatically go to arbitration. It's that basically once the contract has expired, you have 180 days. Now, we've obviously gone way past that, but technically, starting at 180 days, either side can say we're at an impasse, and that will then head to PERB, Public Employee Relations Board, and start the potential process towards arbitration. Now, usually, so DCPS tried it after 3 years. They basically said, we're done, we want to go to arbitration. The arbitrator did say you need to go to mediation. At least that's my understanding. I'm not the one on the team, but that's how it's explained to us. So they said you need to go to mediation. That starts a clock that by law lasts 30 days. I'm not sure if that's calendar or working. My guess is working. And then basically at the end of that, if there's no agreement, then it goes to the arbitrator. Then they've got like 45 days to present their sides, and then the arbitrator makes the call, but that means no vote. If mediation is successful, then there's a tentative agreement. That comes back to members who do get to vote. Now, if we vote no, I'm not sure if that just means then we get kicked to arbitration. That part I don't quite understand, but it's all a legal process. And yeah, impact is terrible, but we can't negotiate it yet. We need legislation.
Thank you very much, Representative Wattenberg. Representative Patterson?
Thank you again. Mr. Richard, we spoke earlier, so if I may, and you may answer some of my questions. If you could read the last bit of your testimony for me that you did not get to read, so
Sure.
that it may answer some of the questions that I have around wrestling and sports. If you want to
Thank
finish
you.
that
I'd
off
be
real
happy
quick.
to do that. There are enough teams to develop girls' leagues at both the middle school and the high school level, so this is an enormous opportunity for DC. It's a novel sport for both boys and girls, so you bring it back in 2022 and you must fund it. You must sponsor it as a girls' team championship varsity sport. To do otherwise would not appear to be legal, and a really bad idea too, because of the loss of opportunities. Wrestling is a foundational sport that develops skills in all other sports. It's the oldest sport. It enhances academic performance. It's a sponsored high school sport in every U.S. state, now finally in DC. And it's also optimal for developing self-defense skills, especially for girls. Maybe why it's so popular for girls now. Wrestling is the fastest growing sport for girls and women in U.S. schools, K through college. It is the newest NCAA sport 2020 for women in all three divisions, with dramatic growth of scholarship opportunities for women. Over 130 colleges, including Marymount now in Arlington, have a wrestling as an NCAA sport for women. Consequently, the mayor, seeking athletic equity and fair shot for the DC girls, launched the Mayor's Advisory Committee on Developing Girls Scholastic Wrestling programs. Its purpose being to model some of the most successful girls scholastic wrestling teams in the U.S. in order to make the DCPS program successful. Until the local school system, the largest LEA, DCPS, funds and sponsors girls wrestling teams, no girls in DC public, private, or charter schools have a fair shot at participating in the newest DCPS girls sport, the newest women's NCAA sport. Until this is promptly corrected, athletic equity is rendered impossible among DC schools. Therefore, DCPS, the DC Mayor, DC Council are urged to collaborate on promptly ensuring full, adequate funding for girls wrestling teams among the participating 16 DCPS schools in the inaugural season upcoming this winter. And to ensure DCPS fully and separately sponsors wrestling as a girls team championship and varsity sport they have separate weight classes and with their own uniforms, competitions, schedules, etc., and their own coaches.
just
And
like
Mr.
basketball.
Richard, since we're over time, what you're really asking us for is to make sure that they adhere to the law, because right now they're in violation of the Title IX. Is that correct?
I would say that that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Representative Patterson. Representative Parker?
Thank you all for your testimony. For the benefit of the public, I would like to ask rapid-fire questions to the teachers, just so that we can get clarity on some of these things. I would also just say, I think it's pretty shameful that we've gone this long without a contract, especially given some of the rhetoric that we hear from our city's leaders. And we discussed tonight just many of the reserves that we have here in the district. And while I know it's not all about money, I do think it just speaks to our commitment to building back from the pandemic. So what would be different with a contract versus where we are now, the status quo?
It's hard to know, not knowing exactly what's being negotiated, because mediation does seem pretty behind closed doors, but obviously compensation with inflation has been a problem. So it is a problem for our members. I think also hopefully if some of the language is tightened up instead of a lot of these shoulds, that we have like some shalls in there, that would be really nice, so we have some actual concrete things to build on.
I would also, as a rapid fire answer, say staff morale, teacher morale. Teachers would feel more valued, and yeah, that'd be huge.
From district leaders, we often hear that the impasse is because teachers want more money. How would you characterize the reason why we haven't reached an agreement?
As I said before, the fact that there is nothing tentatively agreed upon that has been shared by either side says to me that that's not the case. If they had said, we agree on Articles 1, 5, 7, but we're still debating Article 2 on compensation, then I think that that might be a valid argument. But they have said that they agree on nothing. And I gave some pretty basic things that they should be able to agree upon.
How can the public help and stand in solidarity with teachers?
I mean, right now, it seems like the WT is calling on people to contact the mayor directly and let her know it's unacceptable for mediation to not be successful. And at this point, we're in mediation, so we need them to participate in that and not just with the intention of making it go straight to arbitration afterwards.
Is the mayor in the mediation, or is it the chancellor?
I think it's the chancellor's team. I don't even know if the chancellor's.
So should they reach out to the chancellor and the mayor, or just the mayor?
I mean, the mayor in the end makes the call. I think everyone's been pretty clear about that. We've been trying to get higher and higher people up to come into these actual negotiation sessions, because it's just so clear that like it delays. It's like, oh, we got to go back to this person, to that person, to that person. It's like even the chancellor's like, well, I got to wait to hear what the mayor has to say. So in the end, she's the one who's making the call.
And I'll end on, what do you fear is the consequence if we don't reach an agreement soon?
Additional students not having what they need, more teachers leaving the profession, more teachers going to other school districts, our facilities continuing to be poor, safety and security being at risk. The list goes on and on.
Thank you, that's my time.
Thank you very much. You think I would have this down by now?
Me.
Thank you, Representative Masoy.
That was really well done, Representative Parker. I'm going to try to do that too. So I'm sorry, I forgot your name. Ms. Kaskar. So who is responsible for making those particular fixes that need to be done, those tweaks to the language? Is that DCPS? Is that, who is that?
It would be the contract teams. So DCPS has a contract team and WTU has a contract team.
And do you know if those are being raised? Like, who raises those?
We are not privy to what's happening in closed doors, but our lawyers did have a meeting with the greater WTU membership where the lawyers shared with, the WTU lawyers shared with us that there is nothing that is tentatively agreed upon. That usually in a negotiation, there's a list of like tentative agree on, like, yeah, like I said, like we both agree on that section 1 needs to be revised. And then, we'll table section 2 and come back to section 3 later. But there's nothing that is tentatively agreed upon.
And I do just want to say, again, I'm not in those spaces. They would never let me in there. That's cool. But basically, Liz Davis made it really clear, because this has been going on, right? This has been going on a long time. She made it very clear that, like, we would present some pretty basic stuff to DCPS, and they would just come back with managerial rights. What that means is they're not talking about it because they don't feel like they have to. So, like, basic stuff. They would just come back, managerial rights, that means it's done deal. They're not going to talk about it, period. Even if it's like, we want more tech for our classrooms for students. Managerial rights. So that was what Liz Davis made very clear was happening on the regular with basically everything. We want smaller caseloads for special educators and more time for them to do their paperwork and follow the law. Managerial rights. Like, that's just their comeback move. They say it for everything. They basically negotiate
But
nothing.
why? Okay, so now I guess,
Want to, and
I
they
know.
don't feel like they have to,
but-
because we aren't striking.
I think at the end of the day, they do take advantage of the fact that we're going to go to work. And also, it is financially beneficial. The longer they can put off giving us a raise, the more money they can keep in their coffers.
that is,
Because even some of these things that we already do, they still won't agree upon for the sake of the contract. Like, we're already doing it. Why wouldn't you just put it in there?
right, okay. This sounds unbelievably frustrating, and I just want to acknowledge that, and thank you for being here and sharing that with us, and hopefully with the public who is listening. And I guess I'm out of time, but please let us know if there are other specific ways that we can elevate this on your behalf. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Gasoy. Representative Chang?
Thank you, thank you. Just saw the text that we're supposed to speak up, so I will do my best. Ms. Kazakurt, you really persuasively named some of the very archaic aspects of the contract, including digital equity. And I'm curious, as you've raised these issues at your school, separate of this particular negotiation, what has been the response from school leadership?
I am very fortunate at my school. We do have adequate tech. Once again, I did kind of poll various WTU members about these topics.
Yep.
The school leadership is generally, especially when it comes to technology, the process is ridiculous in DCPS, where you have to order from one vendor. I don't know that I'm allowed to use the word price gouge, but it seems like there is a price gouging going on. It's also incredibly delayed. We ordered tech back in the spring and it still hasn't arrived yet. So the general response from school leadership, I would say, is frustration. And it's just like, well, that's the machine. Like, we can't do anything about it.
Okay. And has that been escalated? It sounds like then the school leadership is frustrated too.
I don't generally like to speak for them, but I would think that that's a fair statement.
And so do you know how that's been escalated from there?
I mean, CSO has even fewer protections than WTU. There's a reason they don't show up here and testify, and that's because they can just be kind of, whoop, let go. And we've seen them do it. We saw them do it in the middle of a pandemic. They will stoop at nothing to take control over a situation, right? They will use their power to push people out. They don't even have multi-year contracts kind of to the level that we do. They're really at the whim of the mayor and the chancellor. So, I mean, they don't raise these things, right? The only reason, they wonder why I still have a job. Some people, I mean, fairly wonder why I still have a job doing what I do. And it's because principals basically protect me because I can say what they can't. I can run around and be a crazy person. They can feed me information, not that my current one does, because, got to keep him around. But they do what they can. Like, there's principals in my DMs because I can say what they can. And so they don't fire me.
And Ms. Fuchs, what number contract is this for you to negotiate?
This would be 3, and I've been here for 16 years, and they last.
Okay. And in those 3 years, would you have any 20-second advice for the DC SBOE members on how we from here can support teachers and students given the constraints that you've named?
I mean, I think reaching to your constituents and your networks and letting them know that this is a problem, asking your constituents to contact the mayor to show that they do care about what's happening, because I think she thinks she can just get away with it, and she might be right. But that's what she believes, and that's why she keeps acting this way. So if she's showing that, like, we don't find it okay for this to not, mediation to not be successful, like, mediation has to be successful. Come to the table in good faith. Both sides are going to make some concessions. Let the W2 members then vote on that. Like, mediate in good faith.
Thank you.
And just, yeah. The more people can contact her, anything to try to help her feel the pressure. So, you know, emailing your constituents, asking them to send an email to just the executive office of the mayor, being like, teachers need a fair contract, send.
Thanks.
That'd be nice.
Thank you. Vice President Thompson?
So, good evening. Okay, so I'm just going to be clear about what I'm trying to process. I am not even sure how long it's been since you all have had a contract. Like I shared earlier, my mom retired, and they were like, oh, well, if you stay and wait for the contract to come, you'll get more money. And she was like, yeah, I don't believe you, I'm out. So let's assume that the contract was approved today. When do you start negotiating a new contract?
They've talked about potentially trying to make it last longer. So honestly, if it goes to arbitration, I don't personally want to get a mandated contract that then goes for longer. That to me is frustrating. But the thought would be, it's usually 3 years from the date it passed. So like you don't do it from the back date of 2019. It'd be like in 2022, 3 years.
Got it. Okay,
Usually.
so this would cover all of the retro time too. Okay, got it.
Hopefully.
In theory.
Yeah.
All right, that was my first question. Second, I'm actually surprised to hear some of the things that are in the contract. I am familiar with the fact that there are actually 4 unions that are in schools. Are these things in the other union contracts as well? Or are they just in teacher contracts, like the tech things, like the other facilities things?
I actually tried to look up the CSO contract that just passed, but it's not public yet, so I don't know what's in theirs. I don't believe these are in other contracts.
Okay. All right.
But it's great reading if any of you, need to sleep tonight.
Yeah,
Well,
I'm
part of it is
sure it's
that, like,
riveting.
our goal, teacher contracts tend to be the ones where, like, even if they don't call it that, it's bargaining for the common good. So that does tend to be, like, the angle for teacher contracts in particular, that we argue for our classrooms, not just our benefits. And I do think some of the other locals get a little hamstrings into just being able to argue their benefits, probably because we're the largest one, compared to the others just in terms of number of members.
And then do you all have a sense, I heard the part about promoting DC residency. Do you have a sense of how many of the W2 members are in DC? Like what percentage of the union? Is it more than 50?
My understanding is under half.
Under half. I thought so. I thought it was getting low. Okay. And then
And it is getting lower because of inflation. I know several teachers who have moved out of the district this year.
And just cost of living in general, because it's expensive to live here. That makes sense. I actually have a different question for you, Ms. Kasser. You mentioned getting gang workers in schools, and like, does one's office or like OAG, would they be those people, or is it a different need, and are they just not in contact with your schools?
I actually have a conversation with OAG tomorrow, so I can let you know tomorrow. We've also worked with MOLA quite a bit.
Okay.
But we've heard from many places that the funding for gang prevention has been cut over the past few years.
All right. Thank you. That's my time.
Thank you all for coming. I'm going to move right into my questions as Mr. Ju returns to the podium. I was also going to ask a question around the items that are in the teacher's contract that are not strictly related to labor and working conditions. Can you talk a little bit about why you think that's an important aspect of negotiating your contract and doing that negotiating for the common good?
I think that, the basic argument is that our working conditions are student learning conditions. So we can then make the case that it is, in fact, labor, and it's not just us kind of trying to stretch our reach. That's, I think the main thing. I don't know if you want to add.
I would echo what she said. I would also say it's about equity across the district. So it's, what is in one classroom should also be in another classroom. If we have a set of computers in one classroom, we should have that across the district. If we have working internet in one school, we should have it across. Same thing with locking doors and HVAC.
I wanted to follow up too, Ms. Kasser, on your point about email and social media. Can you say more about what you think ought to be in a renegotiate a teacher's contract regarding those very modern facts of employment and life?
Sure, I love when people ask for my opinion. I think, for example, Laura's probably tweeting right now, should she be able to be fired for that, right? Like, that's something that should be in there. Also, the relationship with, I mean, a huge one is the relationships with students in social media, right? Are you allowed to friend, not that our students are on Facebook anymore, but are you allowed to friend one of them on Facebook while they're your student? Are you not? Can you do it once they graduate? What is the relationship with email? And, you know, how long do I have to respond to an angry parent when they email me? You know, is that by the end of the day? Is that in 24 hours? You know, what can I put in email? What can be searched in my work email? What cannot be? I mean, obviously there's like legal things, but just on a general basis, who has access to my email? Does my boss have my access, et cetera? So those are just some of the topics, but specifically around students and these things, am I allowed to directly email a student, or should there always be a third party on that email? Things along those lines would be really important to know.
That's super helpful. Thank you. I wanted to just use my last couple of seconds to thank you, Mr. Richard, for your advocacy on behalf of sports for girls and women. I think it's super important. I also think it's incredibly important that DC be mindful of making sure our students have access to a wide range of sports so that they can understand fitness, lifelong fitness, opportunities to engage in sports that students across the country have access to. So I appreciate so much your continued advocacy on behalf of this, and I look forward to working with my colleagues. I know Dr. Patterson was moved by this, about ways we can think about that sort of advocacy for girls' sports, and particularly the sport of wrestling.
Thank you.
Thank you. I yield my time.
Thank you all very much. Right now we are going to transition to our panelists who have joined us virtually via Zoom. So if folks give me 30 seconds or so to get that set up, would be great. Thank you.
Thank you all for coming tonight.
Thank you.
Okay, I believe I've let in everybody who has joined us virtually via Zoom. And so we are going to begin with the names as they appear on my agenda in front of me. And so I do see Ms. Burke via video. And Ms. Burke, can I just get a confirmation or a thumbs up that you can hear me? Can you just give me, I couldn't quite hear you, but you can hear me, I think. Okay. Hold on one second. Caitlin, are we good? Okay. All right, I'm going to start with, is Ms. Stamper on? She is not. I will go to Ms. Richardson.
I'm sorry, did you say Ms. Richardson?
Yes, I said Ms. Richardson.
Hi.
All right, I'm going to start with Ms. Stamper on. For folks who have joined via Zoom, please make sure that the live stream is off or closed. We are getting a little bit of feedback from that. And also there will be a virtual timer that you should see. Ms. Richardson, it does appear that you might be having some echo
Hi, I'm sorry, there's like an echo. Are y'all hearing the echo, or is it just me?
Ms. Richardson, do you have the Zoom or the YouTube chat on in your background? If so, if you could close that window out. While you're working on that, I'm going to move to Ms. Washington. Ms. Washington, we're going to go to you next. Ms. Washington?
I'm here.
Yes, we are going to go to you next.
I'm next?
Yes, you are.
Okay, I appreciate that. Let me go. I can start right this second. You didn't start the clock yet, did you?
It will start as soon as you start your testimony.
Okay. My name is Myrtle Washington. I am president of Washington Substitute Teachers United. I became a substitute teacher in 2013 during my Yes? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
We can hear you.
Okay, I just stopped.
Ms. Washington, we can hear you. If you can continue your remarks, please.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I stopped because it was confusing to me. I didn't realize that I am behind. Can you let me start again?
Yes, that's fine. We'll restart the clock for you.
I appreciate that. I won't stop this time. My name is Myrtle Washington. I am president of Washington Substitute Teachers United. I became a substitute teacher in 2013 during my orientation. I learned that substitute teachers had not received a pay raise since 2008. It was $15 an hour in 2008, and it only changed to $20 an hour in 2022 after 4 long years of protest. It was in October 2018 that we organized into a solid entity. We became Washington Substitute Teachers United. It was not easy to make contact with other substitute teachers. We could not use their DCPS emails to organize, but once the word got out that we were trying to unify, we got email lists from others who were also interested in organizing to increase our pay and other benefits. We wrote letters, signed and delivered petitions, visited council members, met with the deputy chancellor, and then the chancellor several times. We spoke to the education committee and the committee of the whole. In January 2022, we started protesting outside the Wilson building every Monday for 1 hour, and those who could did not report to work on that day either. We got a response from DCPS only when our plight was in the news, and then on April 26th, we got word that we would see a $5 or $10 raise if we worked 30 consecutive days. In our May 6th paycheck, after 14 years, we got a $5 or $10 raise. We're still fighting. White House interns, for the first time in history, earned $750 for 35 hours a week. That comes to about $21 an hour. DC Summer Youth Program participants earned $20 an hour. Why can't DCPS substitute teachers earn a salary that shows our worth? Up until March, substitute teachers had to have a bachelor's degree. A number of us have a bachelor's degree and more. We bring our education and experiences into the classroom. DCPS schools need substitute teachers. I get desperate calls or emails from schools several days during the week. At least 300 substitute teachers have taken other jobs. Our children are behind in learning. DCPS needs qualified and caring people in each classroom to bring our children up to where they need to be in pre-K, first, second, third, fourth, fifth, and beyond. Can this body help substitute teachers? If so, let us know. If not, please point out a next step for us to consider. Thank you. Myrtle Washington.
Thank you very much, Ms. Washington. We will try to go back to Ms. Richardson.
Hello, I hope you guys can hear me this time. My name is Brittany Richardson. I am the 5-6 Humanities teacher at Center City Petworth Charter School. Additionally, I serve as the Family and Community Voice Organizer for the DC-based education nonprofit, Empower Ed. It's great that because of Empower Ed's RepDC campaign, there's necessary work being done to diversify the teacher workforce in DC and ensure that our students have access to educators that reflect the population we serve in the district. However, my concern lies with the allocation of funds for this program. Considering OSSE has chosen American University and Relay Graduate School as grant recipients, the initiative would be far more cost efficient if we partner with local universities such as Trinity and UDC. These programs are far more affordable teacher preparation programs, which allow us to serve many more potential educators. Additionally, I would be remiss if I did not acknowledge the incredibly diverse demographic of emerging professionals enrolled in institutions such as Howard University. UDC is also another HBCU in the area. Lastly, in addition to cost effectiveness and increased racial and cultural diversity, these university programs provide targeted programs in areas where we have excessive shortages in our workforce, such as our emerging bilingual population and our special education population. So while I think that starting this initiative is a great, start point for this, I think that we should be more mindful of where we are allocating our funds and who we are preparing to come into the workforce in Washington, D.C. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Right now we'll go to Ms. Roblin.
Did you say me? Me? Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you. Hi, my name is Anna Roblin. I've been a substitute teacher for about 6 years in DCPS. I'm with Myrtle Washington. We're together. We're both in part of the WSTU organizing group. And Myrtle explained everything really well, so I'll just add a few things. We have a sign-on letter that we would really love it if you, all of the representatives would sign it. I attached it in the testimony, the written testimony. It's basically stating, what we're asking for. Also, if it's possible, I think it would be really, really helpful if you all could help possibly with mediation between us and Ms. Bowser, between us, Ms. Bowser, Mr. Farabee. And I just wanted to say, if you have any ideas on how we can further our goals, we really could use to hear your ideas. We've been struggling with trying to get into WTU, and they're, very busy with our transition right now, but it's been going on for a long time. And before they had a transition, it wasn't going anywhere.
Ms. Roblin, you are frozen at this moment,
Yes.
so we...
Through COVID, and I think that's all I have to say. We're just, looking for whatever kind of support, especially for the sign-on letter and whatever other ideas you all have. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Roblin. We'll move to Ms. Burke.
Good evening. My name is Claire Berkey, and I am the English Department Chair at Banneker High School, where I teach writing and lead numerous clubs. I am also halfway through a doctoral program in education policy and leadership studies with an emphasis on equity and improving literacy instruction. I have 3 children who attend Seton Elementary School in Ward 2. Tonight, I am asking you to stand with the Washington Teachers Union as we advocate for a fair contract for DCPS teachers and all members of our collective bargaining units. Why now? It has been 3 years since our last contract expired. That means 3 years of receiving no cost of living adjustments and no opportunities to solidify protections for new and evolving working conditions. In the last 3 years, I know I don't need to remind you, a global pandemic upended our society and schools, killed family members and friends, and contributed to an economy characterized by inflation and environmental devastation. As I think back on my 14 years in DC public schools, I remember clearly when new contracts were agreed upon. My first year of teaching, with the advent of the impact evaluation system, and my 8th year of teaching in 2017, the year when, surprise, I gave birth to twin girls. But I don't just remember the years, I remember the specific numbers associated with these events. A teacher in DC who is the breadwinner or sole earner for their family feels every slight increase or decrease in income. When surprises happen, like needing to pay double for exorbitant daycare, or having a child in the NICU for months, or having a partner lose a job, teachers take out credit card debt and take on second and third jobs. There is little to no wiggle room in many of our personal budgets. And so when gas prices soar over $4 a gallon and interest rates rise when you need to finance a car, and the cost of turkey for your kids' favorite sandwiches rises by 18%, you feel it. Additionally, teachers' job expectations have continued to shift in recent years, and the pressure to increase test scores is as strong as ever. As a researcher of educational best practices who is deeply familiar with our students' data points, I know that ensuring educational equity requires more time for planning, collaboration, instructional feedback. To serve all of our students well and to make sure that every child can read by the 3rd grade will take a Herculean effort by all involved: students, teachers, instructional leaders, families, and city officials. If we are serious about being the best school district in the country, teachers need to feel that this city has our back. Teachers like myself and my colleagues are already giving up time with our families to sponsor after-school activities. We are paying out of pocket for student snacks, and we are taking on student loans for professional development. We need our elected officials to stand alongside us and ensure a fair contract now. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Berkey. I will now move to Ms. Boyd. Ms. Boyd, if you can hear me, you're next.
Okay, I'm sorry, I didn't hear you at first. Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to speak at tonight's hearing. My name is Casey Boyd. I am a school librarian at Jefferson Academy. I'm a proud second-generation educator with numerous aunts and uncles who also work in education, and I have earned 3 master's degrees and currently taking a short break for my doctoral program. I have 2 requests for the State Board of Ed tonight. One is to take a stand with the Washington Teachers Union as we advocate for a fair contract for DCPS teachers and all members of our collective bargaining unit. And 2, please support Council Bill B24-0443, which is the Students' Right to Read Amendment Act of 2021. Though I've only been working for DCPS for 5 years, I have a unique experience with union contract and negotiations. As a child in Chicago, my parents worked with the late Jacqueline Vaughn, president of the Chicago Teachers Union, to fight for improved education conditions, resources, and the cost of living increases for teachers. Now, during my tenure with Chicago Public Schools, I worked with the late Karen Jennings Lewis to fight against privatization, a troublesome evaluations system, and merit pay. Now, I'm working for DCPS, and I find it really interesting that there are parallels between Chicago and Washington, D.C., which include wages, evaluation, and respect. DCPS teachers answered the call, came to work during the pandemic, got vaccines, dealt with building conditions that were not quite acceptable in some areas of the city, and supported our students who struggled academically, socially, and emotionally. For school librarians, B24-0443, the Students' Right to Read Amendment Act, was introduced on November 23rd, 2021, so it's almost a year, and has since has stalled in the council. This bill will ensure that sufficient funding for a full-time certified librarian will be placed in every DCPS school. We're hoping that this amendment will eliminate the inconsistent staffing of school librarians throughout the district. Principals have been able to petition away the position, leaving students without valuable service that a school librarian can provide. Now, while funds were made available during the 2021 and now 2022 school years, librarians are looking towards the future. Consistent funding of the program and position must be made to support our students. So it's interesting, every time that there's a budget crisis, it's like they come for the librarians all the time. So it's very difficult to balance the pay and pay out of pocket for, I'll use myself as example, for my makerspace supplies, basic library management supplies for my library program that's not covered by Office Depot, and it's difficult to supplement the much needed books and other materials when my Donors Choose grants can't cover them. Now, teachers haven't had the cost of living raised since our last contract. It's also very worrisome, and I'm going to conclude to work where you have been asked to perform duties outside of your job description, like teaching classes because of the lack of classroom teaching staff. These duties do pull librarians away from their core responsibilities in developing a love for reading with the kids, collaborating with classroom teachers, and maintaining the collection. By passing the new teacher's contract, these protections will support librarians and provide a much needed clarity and boundaries for all. Now, despite these struggles, I'm really proud that my library program contributed to the historic million print and digital content items used by students and teachers during the 2021 to 2022 school year. You will see that attached in my testimony. And the school library was a center of learning in every DCPS school. So I just ask that DCPS if you could give us the support in these two areas. DCPS has the potential to be the best urban school district in the country. We just need your support and advocacy to obtain a fair contract and a just contract. And we need your support in getting Council Bill B24-0443 passed. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Boyd, and to all the panelists. At this time, we will turn to member questions. For those who've joined virtually, you'll see a timer on the Zoom screen when you're in gallery mode. For folks and members in the room, the clock will be set in here as well, so they will both be running concurrently. If you give me 1 second, I will start the member questions shortly. All right, we will begin with our student representatives. Representative Bernstad.
Hi. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming. Congratulations, Ms. Boyd, on everything you do all the time, but also being named as the DC Public School Librarian, being named as the Policy Leader of the Year. I had a question if librarians saw any of the ESSER funding, and if the ESSA funding expiring in 2 years would affect librarians even more, and just kind of how, if at all, you've seen ESSA funding in your libraries or libraries across DC schools.
I'm so sorry, I'm having a really hard time hearing you.
No worries. I'm
I
going to
think
try
you're
and be
talking about
louder.
ESSER funds.
Yeah, I was just wondering if librarians saw ESSER funding at all, and how ESSER funding may or may not affect, ESSER funding expiring may or may not affect librarians in district schools.
If it was ESSER funds at the state, at the school level, it varied from school to school. I can only speak for myself. I didn't receive any funds, and I knew that the funds were there. I asked for them and I just didn't receive them for whatever reasons. I am certain that, while I may have not received it, there might have been another situation at another school. So, to track that, I think it would be great if you all could reach out to the library department. They should be able to probably give you a little more feedback on that.
Okay, thank you so much. And for Ms. Richardson, I had a question about teacher preparatory programs and how the state board can best support continuation of teacher preparatory programs. I know we had a panel on this earlier in the year, but I was just wondering what concrete things you think we can take away from your testimony to work on.
I'm sorry, you kind of went out at the end of your question.
I'm sorry, I'm trying to be louder. From your testimony, what do you think the state board can concretely do to best support teacher preparatory programs?
Yes, so thank you for your question. How can the state best support? I think that we need to be a lot more intentional about the partnerships that we are, developing with the schools. Even with high schools, the universities, so many states have amazing grow your own teacher initiatives that they're doing where they are looking for educators in their own community or potential educators in their own community and setting them up for success. And I feel like DC, while we are on that track, we are not where we can be or where we should be.
Okay, thank you all so much for your testimony and time tonight.
Representative O'Leary.
I'd like to thank all of y'all because I know some of you, and I'm not going to belabor the point about how our leaders have failed the substitute teachers and the teachers and the librarians, and they've been treated with no respect. And we as a community need to pass the word to our friends to try to get the leaders in the city to react to the neglect that has been done to the teachers. The principal's got a contract, and I have this gut feeling that the fact that the principal's got a contract might have been trying to put a wedge between the leaders of the schools and their teachers. And I hope that that's not true, but I think it's very important that we do all we can do to support the people in the building that are educating our children, and they need to be have the right amount of money as they do it. And I just want to thank y'all. Thank you.
Representative Wattenberg.
Thank you. Thanks to all of you for coming, and also a congratulations to Ms. Boyd on your award from NASB. Congrats on that. I wanted to say one thing to the teachers about the contract, and then I want to talk more about the subs. Just, I'm with you. I hope maybe we can have a resolution about this, perhaps next time. You guys did such enormous work during the pandemic. It's really quite unfortunate, to say the least, that you're still without a contract after 3 years. So I'll leave it at that for the moment. I want to ask the substitutes if they might want to say a little bit to the audience about some other conditions that you're dealing with. You know, in the schools, there's a great substitute shortage. We're losing teachers. We don't have subs. We have some people from central office coming out. Administrators in schools are sometimes subbing. But there's quite a shortage, and I wonder if you could say something about how the conditions or the pay are affecting that. And you did talk about the $21 an hour if you work for 30 days, but I wonder if you could talk about some of the other conditions, benefits, et cetera, and the effect it's having
Yes.
on.
Yeah, this is Myrtle Washington. I hope you can hear me. Let me be clear on that. Regular substitute teachers who might work 1, 2, 3, 4 days a week, we're paid $20 an hour. Now, remember, it was $15 an hour for 14 years. So in February, we got a $5 raise. We saw it in our paychecks in May, but we got a $5 raise after 14 years. And that was for those of us who did not work 30 consecutive days. If you worked 30 consecutive days, then you got a $10 raise, all right? So this is 14 years, $5 or $10, depending on how much you work. Now, as you well know, a lot of people quit their jobs during COVID. And who decided to take those jobs? Substitute teachers. So we lost about 300 substitute teachers to other places, jobs, cities, or whatever. And I can definitely understand. Those of us who remain, we are called, some of us are called every day because the schools cannot supply enough substitute teachers to cover. Who loses time, energy, and effort, and who gets neglected? The children, because there are not enough substitute teachers to take the positions, to do the work, to help our children on a regular basis. And our children are behind. Third graders cannot read the way third graders used to be able to read. So, you know, our children are behind, and it doesn't seem as though we get the respect. And I'm sure the regular teachers can say the same thing. We don't get the respect of taking care of our children. A judge told me, he said, you're being exploited, talking about substitute teachers, because we love what we do. Most of us love what we do. And we come in, whether rain, sleet, snow, shine, during COVID, after the virtual, we did virtual, and then after virtual, we took our shots and we came into the building. So we love our children. And it does not appear that this administration, the council members they don't really recognize us. They don't respect us either. They don't respect us and the job that we're doing in the public school system. So, you know, we all have the same complaints. We're not being respected the way we should be, especially after coming through a COVID that had children out, some of them for almost 2 years.
Thank you very much, Ms. Washington. The time actually has expired.
Yes, no problem.
Representative Patterson? Okay, no questions. Representative Parker?
Thank you all for sharing. I have no question.
Representative Gasoy?
Thank you. I just want to thank you all for sticking with us, and I know it's a school night. And we will be discussing how best to support in the ways that we can. So, and I especially just wanted to thank Ms. Washington and Ms. Roblin for bringing this issue to our attention. So, that's all.
Representative Chang?
Good evening. Thank you so much for joining us. Ms. Casey, I wanted to ask for your take on where we are with B240443 and how those of us on the board can be supportive in the coming months.
Ms. Boyd, the question was to you from Representative Chang. He was asking about the current bill before council and what can be done to be supportive of it.
The current bill you're referring, is the questions regarding the current bill?
The status of, or where it is right now based on what she's...
Yes, the status of and where it is based on what you know.
It's actually stalled. The bill was signed off, and it's linked in my testimony. It was signed off by a lot of the council members, including the chairman, but it hasn't moved since then. And I believe that after a year, it actually dies. So we're coming up on a year very soon, and I just don't understand why this bill cannot be moved forward.
Okay, we will look into it. Thank you.
Anything else, Representative Chang? Okay. Vice President Thompson?
No, I'd just like to thank everyone for testifying, congratulate Ms. Boyd, and officially say we have all missed Abbott Elementary together, because it's 9:31.
Okay, President Sutter.
Thank you so much. Thank you to all of the witnesses who stuck with us to testify tonight. Thank you for making time to share with us your questions and concerns, and for giving us specific points on which we can support you all in advocating. Ms. Boyd, I will echo my congratulations to you for the upcoming NASB Award. Ward 6 is deeply grateful to have you serving the scholars at Jefferson Academy. Thank you so much to all of you. Have a great evening.
All right, at this time, those who have joined virtually can exit the Zoom, and I believe we will be transitioning to some administrative items in the next 30 seconds or so. Thank you very much.
Colleagues, thank you all for your good questions, to our public witnesses tonight, and for sticking with us. We are grateful for all the folks who came to testify to us, both in person and virtually. We deeply appreciate being kept in the loop on the issues that are of importance to our educators, our families, and students. We are now going to move on to our administrative votes. Our first ceremonial resolution is CR 22-28, recognizing National Suicide Prevention Week. Representative O'Leary, would you like to make a motion?
So moved.
A motion has been made by Representative O'Leary. Is there a second?
Second.
The motion has been seconded by Representative Bernstad. The resolution having been properly moved and seconded, Mr. Jew will read the resolution into the record.
State Board of Education Ceremonial Resolution, CR 22-28, recognizing National Suicide Prevention and Awareness Week. Whereas the United States recognizes National Suicide Prevention and Awareness Week each year on the week of September 10th, World Suicide Prevention Day. Whereas the purpose of National Suicide Prevention and Awareness Week is to bring awareness to suicide prevention by engaging healthcare professionals and advocates to support and inform the general public about the issues concerning mental health crises and suicide. Whereas in 2020, the Suicide Resource Prevention Center reported that suicide is the second leading cause of death for youth within the ages of 10 to 14 and young adults within the ages of 25 to 34. Whereas there are several risk factors that may lead to suicide across community groups, including but not limited to stress resulting from historical trauma and discrimination known to directly affect LGBTQ+ youth. Whereas the DC Youth Risk Behavior Survey is conducted by the Office of the State Superintendent of Education every 2 years, specifically addressing risk behaviors in middle and high schools across DC, and in their findings from 2019, highlighted that 15% of students reported a suicide attempt compared to the national average of 12%. And whereas education agencies in DC work to enhance student mental health support by increasing access to mental health services through the partnership between public schools and community mental health organizations, and there is a continued effort to expand these services to serve all 244 public and public charter schools. Now therefore be it resolved that the DC State Board of Education recognizes and observes National Suicide Prevention and Awareness Week and works to advocate and inform preventative education within schools and throughout communities to raise awareness and thwart continued instances of suicide.
Dr. O'Leary.
I'd just like to if you look at the resolution, and it says there is a continued effort to expand these services to serve all 244 public and public charter schools. We need to make sure, at least to raise our voices, to make sure that there's not just a continued effort to do that, but that that's done. When I think it was Ms. Fuchs was talking about the contract and the verbiage in the contract for the teachers, that was talking about we're going to think about doing this and things like that. As someone who's been affected by suicide in my family and as a teacher, and especially in these times in the last couple of years with the pandemic, where the stress on everyone, especially young people, is much greater than it's ever. And we talk about social emotional learning, but there's a whole lot of social emotional learning that's going on in the schools these days. And so we really need to focus on our children's mental health instead of test scores. Thank you.
Is there further discussion? Representative Brinstad.
Thank you. I wanted to highlight a specific part of the resolution that talks about how LGBTQ youth are at significantly increased risk of suicide. This is people aged 13 to 24, and LGBTQ youth faces a lot of pathologization, both from family and community members and at school. They're actually 4 times more likely than our peers to attempt suicide. At least one LGBTQ youth attempts suicide every 45 seconds. So I think when we talk about how we can prevent suicide at DC schools, it's important that we talk about specific student groups. Yeah.
Thank you, Representative Brinstad. Is there further discussion? Seeing no further discussion, the motion is on adoption of the resolution. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, say no. The ayes have it, and the motion carries. Our next resolution is CR 22-29, celebrating Hispanic Heritage Month. Representative Gasoy, would you like to make the motion?
Yes, I would. So moved.
A motion has been made by Representative Gasoy. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Dr. Patterson. The motion has been seconded by Dr. Patterson. The resolution being properly moved and seconded, Mr. Jew will read the resolution into the record.
State Board of Education Ceremonial Resolution, CR 22-29, celebrating National Hispanic Heritage Month. Whereas the United States observes National Hispanic Heritage Month each year from September 15th to October 15th, continuing a tradition that began in 1968 under President Lyndon B. Johnson as Hispanic Heritage Week, and that was expanded by President Ronald Reagan in 1988. Whereas the purpose of National Hispanic Heritage Month is to celebrate the language, culture, contributions, and history of the Hispanic and Latinx communities in the United States who represent ancestry from Spain, Africa, Mexico, the Caribbean, Central and South America. Whereas Hispanic Heritage Month acknowledges the anniversary of independence for several Latin American countries, including Costa Rica, Guatemala, Honduras, Mexico, and Nicaragua. Whereas the Smithsonian Institution is building the National Museum of the American Latino to recognize the accomplishments, history, and culture of Latinx communities. Whereas the Department of Homeland Security has issued a proposed rulemaking to preserve and fortify the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, also known as DACA policy, effective October 31st, 2022, which would impact our students, their families, and residents across the district. Whereas more than 77,000, or 11%, of DC residents are Hispanic or Latinx heritage, according to the most recent data from the United States Census Bureau. Whereas over 17,000, or 18%, of DC students identify as Hispanic or Latinx, and whereas National Hispanic Heritage Month will be commemorated this year in the district and schools and neighborhoods with events, festivals, programs, and activities surrounding the 2022 theme, Unidos, Inclusivity for a Stronger Nation. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the DC State Board of Education recognizes and celebrates National Hispanic Heritage Month and the history, achievements, and contributions of the district's residents of Hispanic and Latinx ancestry. And be it further resolved that the State Board recognizes and values the importance of culturally sustaining pedagogy, dual language immersion programs, and bilingual methods of instruction as important elements of equity and excellence in education.
Thank you. Is there discussion on the resolution? Representative Gasoy.
Thank you. First, I want to thank all of the dual language schools and language immersion programs in my ward and citywide, the International Academy at Cardozo Educational Campus, and the alternative and adult ed schools serving so many of our Hispanic students of all ages. There are so many organizations, I'm not going to name them tonight, but who have been instrumental and absolutely essential in supporting students and families who identify as Latinx. And I also want to thank Empower Ed for the work that they are doing and have already done to help to close the gap between Latinx students and Latinx teachers. I also just want to note that we have hit a grim milestone in our country of, I think it's 2 million migrants from Latin America have been detained at the border this year. And thousands of those migrants fleeing violence and poverty have been bused to DC, as we know, and a lot of those families are going to have children who end up in our schools throughout the year. So I do want to just emphasize that we really need to ensure that they are resourced and sufficiently staffed to meet those needs. I do want to thank Mayor Bowser for attempting to obtain federal support to ensure migrants sent from Texas and Arizona are receiving support they need to live in dignity while seeking asylum. And finally, I want to thank my council member, Councilmember Nadeau, for being a champion for immigrant rights in our ward and in response to the current influx of hundreds of migrants each day, for moving legislation to establish a new Office of Migration Services within DHS so we can live up to our commitment and responsibility as a sanctuary city.
Thank you, Representative Gasoy. Is there further discussion on the motion?
Yes, I just have a couple of things. Between 2016 and 2020, this country almost underwent a tremendous revolution, in a backwards revolution, especially for the Latinos or people who identify themselves as Latinos in this country. And thankfully, hopefully, we are on a different trajectory. In our resolution, it talks about sustaining or culturally sustaining pedagogy. And we know that right now, pedagogy is under attack in many of the states in this country who are trying to erase history, not allow students to read books about the others or written by the others. And I just want to commend the State Board of Education for this very well thought out resolution that addresses the problems that we're facing every day in this country.
Thank you, Dr. O'Leary. Is there further discussion on the resolution? Vice President Thompson.
I wanted to note, because I know sometimes the Hispanic families in my ward particularly don't feel seen because they're just a smaller group, that we know that diversity is true across our city, that it's both the people who are new arrivals and the people who have been here that we need to support, and we have to stay committed to, we see you, we support you. and we welcome you as part of our city.
Thank you, Vice President Thompson. Seeing no further discussion, the motion is on adoption of the resolution. All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed, say no. The ayes have it, and the motion carries. Members, our final resolution is SR 22-7, Fiscal Year 2024 Need for Appropriations and Enhancements Resolution. I'll note for members that there's also an equity statement which has been added to Assembly, which was missing earlier today. So that is there for your reference, and I think it's also in our materials. Is there a motion on the resolution?
So moved.
Thank you, Vice President Thompson. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Representative Gassoy. The motion being properly moved and seconded, Mr. Ju will read the resolution into the record.
State Board of Education Resolution SR 22-7, approval of fiscal year 2024 need for appropriations and enhancements. Whereas in 2013, the Council of the District of Columbia approved the State Board of Education Personnel Authority Amendment Act of 2022, effective April 27, 2013, to ensure that the DC State Board of Education had the authority to operate as an independent agency, including through the hiring of its own staff and preparing its own budget. Whereas DC Official Code, Section 38-2652, D3 reads, beginning in fiscal year 2013, the board shall prepare and submit to the mayor for inclusion in the annual budget prepared and submitted to the council pursuant to Part D of Subchapter 4, 5, 6, of Chapter 4 of Chapter 2 of Title 1, Section 204.41, annual estimates of the expenditures and appropriations necessary for the operation of the board for the year, and all the estimates shall be forwarded by the mayor to the council for, in addition to the mayor's recommendation, action by the council pursuant to Section 1-204.46 and Section 1-206.03C. Whereas the State Board staff have prepared a budget that reflects the need for appropriations to meet the priorities in fiscal year 2024 of the agency's 3 offices, the Office of the State Board of Education, the Office of the Ombudsman for Public Education, and the Office of the Student Advocate. Whereas the proposed fiscal year 2024 budget and related enhancements have been discussed at working sessions of the State Board on August 3rd, 2022 and September 7th, 2022. Whereas the State Board is appreciative of the trust placed in it by residents and shall remain open and transparent about its spending. Whereas in the fiscal year that begins on October 1st, 2023, the State Board proposes a need for appropriations of $2,980,498.87, with $432,551 being spent on program activities and the remainder on personnel in accordance with the attached chart. And whereas the State Board proposes $811,000 in additional appropriations for the agency in the form of enhancement requests, and confirms that these requests would amplify and extend the capabilities of the agency. Now therefore be it resolved that on September 21st, 2022, the DC State Board of Education approves its fiscal year 2024 need for appropriations and enhancements, and requests that the mayor include in her annual budget submission the estimate approved herein.
Thank you, Mr. Ju. I'm pleased I'm not the only one stumbling over my words at almost 10 o'clock at night. Seeing, is there discussion from members on the resolution? Representative Bernstad.
Okay, I am a little less emotional about our fiscal year needs, so I will stay dry-eyed for this one. The equity statement I'm really happy about because the second bullet point increases student representative stipends to $1,000 for fiscal year 2024, which is super exciting because student representatives do a lot of work on top of a school day. For instance, I left my house this morning at 7:30. It is almost 10 p.m. Yeah, I'm just super excited about that, and I'm glad the board was receptive to when it was brought up at the working session. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Bernstad. Other discussion? Representative Wattenberg.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I raised at the working meeting how important I thought it was for the board to continue its commitment to taking up research that would bring forward some of the issues that have been raised in the city. I mean, teacher turnover has been one that we have talked about, and some others. I think there's money in this budget that could support it, so I'm not going to bring that forward as anything separate, and that will be up for the next board to sort of work its way through as they come in next January. But I did want to raise that I think it's an important thing to continue with. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Wattenberg. Is there further discussion? Then I'll take just a moment of presidential privilege and thank our student representatives for raising the question around the equity of student stipends. In discussion, the membership and the admin committee discussed this idea of increasing the student stipends and focusing it on what we're calling an educational services scholarship, so that it is not treated as any sort of conflict with the notion of also receiving service hours for your incredible amount of service to the board, but also as a way to ensure that all students who serve on the board have an opportunity to receive funding that will further their future choices, whether those choices be two-year colleges, four-year colleges, other training programs as part of their work. So we're incredibly grateful that the students brought us this idea and that we were able to include it in the budget, along with important ways to extend the capacity of our agency, both in terms of staff as well as in terms of the kinds of studies that Representative Wattenberg referenced in her comments. So I'm appreciative of all the work that my colleagues put in suggesting ideas, in talking through them, and in landing on the need for appropriations that we're going to vote on now. Seeing no further discussion, the motion is on adoption of SR 22-7. Mr. Jew will call the roll.
Representative Bernstead?
Aye.
Representative Burgess? Representative Wages? Representative Washington? Representative Gasoy?
Aye.
Representative Chang? Aye. Representative Wattenberg?
Aye.
Representative O'Leary?
Aye.
Representative Parker?
Aye.
Representative Patterson?
Aye.
Representative Thompson?
Aye.
And Representative Sutter?
Aye.
The motion passes.
Thank you, Mr. Jew. Members, that brings us to the end of our administrative agenda. That brings us to new business. Members, are there any items of new business or announcements? We'll begin with Representative Wattenberg.
At the last working meeting, I had brought a resolution for us to adopt that would put forward the board's priorities for the research collaborative, which was mentioned by President Sutter earlier tonight. We had a discussion there, and one idea was also to have a letter that would contain those recommendations that we would send, which was a nice way and with the right tone to send to the collaborative to include. So I'm very much in favor of that. I believe we have a draft, and I believe it's going to go out this Friday, is my understanding. In addition, I had raised then, and I've raised since, that I think it's also important to adopt this letter as a resolution, because in addition to wanting to communicate this to the research collaborative, it should be part of what people find when they go to the board. And all of my experience is that if it's not a resolution, it doesn't get captured in the same way with the same level of prestige and attention. So I'm not going to do anything tonight, partly because it's late, and even more because we realized that we hadn't brought this to the Student Advisory Committee. We want to be sure to do that. So we'll be bringing it to the, it'll come before the Student Advisory Committee at some point between now and October, and I'll raise it in October.
Okay.
Thank you.
We meet once in October. Sorry, I know it's not my time. But if you want, you can send it to us via email, and we can review it over email, because we only meet once a month now.
Very good.
Thank you, Representative Wattenberg. Are there any questions or comments for Representative Wattenberg? Representative Gasoy.
First, I just wanted to thank our staff, and our leadership actually did a great job tonight leading this new old meeting, this hybrid meeting. So I just wanted to give some appreciation. After listening to the all the teachers who testified tonight, I would like to put forward the idea of having a resolution, and I know we will discuss this further, but just wanted to put that out there for the public, that this is something we will discuss.
Representative Gasoy, can I just ask a point of clarification? A resolution regarding the teacher's contract, regarding substitute teachers, regarding
Sorry, yeah, I know
something
there
more
was a lot-
generally?
Yeah, there were a lot of topics. It's late, sorry.
I hear you.
The contract.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Are there questions or comments for Representative Gasoy? Okay. Representative Bernstadt, did you have an item of new business?
Yes, I'm sorry, I know it's late. This is really quick, and I want to talk about this more at our working session, but I just want to bring it up now really quickly. Currently, 5 committees exist via our bylaws, and the Student Advisory Committee is not one of the advisory committees that exists in our bylaws, which means it doesn't have to exist, just that the student representatives have to exist. And changes to our bylaws can be proposed and made with a 2/3 affirmative vote from the full board. No resolution is needed. Yeah, I wanted to bring it up now so people are aware of it, but this is something I think we should at least talk about at the working session, but not now. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Bernstadt. Are there questions or comments for Representative Bernstadt? Okay. Are there other items of new business from members? Okay, Representative Wattenberg has another, and then I'm going to end with Vice President Thompson.
Thank you. I really just wanted to say, and I know I speak for everybody, and Representative Gasoy already said it. My presidency ended, I think, almost 2 years ago or more than 2 years ago. And even then, we were talking about the difficulties of coming back in a hybrid virtual session. We already knew how difficult it would be, and it has been many months, I know, of the staff and the admin committee and the officers trying to figure out how to do this. And I just, again, all plaudits to you for pulling this off. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Wattenberg. Vice President Thompson.
All right, I have 2 items of new business. One is both a continuation of what I was trying to work through at the working session when I asked for feedback around what we do regarding the violence that's happening kind of in and around our schools. And it came up tonight again when the teacher talked about the need for both like de-escalation and like people in the building who address different concerns. I would like to propose a path forward. One, I actually think it makes sense to send a letter to the deputy mayor, and I am saying a letter, to the deputy mayor for public safety and the respective agencies to understand how they're supposed to interact with schools in particular. 2, I think actually it makes sense to how we are doing a panel for sexual assault. We might actually want to invite some of those agencies to come speak to us. It can either be at a public meeting or we can set up some type of panel to better understand what is, again, supposed to be happening, because no one can answer that question as far as like what it looks like in our schools and communities to keep people safe. And then once we have a better sense of that information, I would like the board to propose some recommendations around that. So that's my first item of business. The second thing is actually, and I'm again going with a letter here, I think we need to make a data request around school support staff. I'm calling this school support staff because I think we have a lot of data around teachers. And if they're being retained, if they're, present in buildings, and they are not the only ones in buildings. Everything from the crossing guard issue to do we have cafeteria workers? Do we have enough janitorial staff, which continues to come up? I know you all have been in buildings just like I've been in buildings. And we actually do not know how pervasive those issues are that make our buildings run. And so I would like to actually, and I think it's OSSI to start with, but I would like to know some better data on our school support staff and how those positions are, if those positions are adequately staffed currently in our schools. So those are my 2 items.
Thank you, Vice President Thompson. Are there any questions or comments for Vice President Thompson? Okay. Thank you, members, for sticking with us and for your announcements and new business items. We are going to move towards closing this meeting. I appreciate that everyone stayed engaged with us tonight. It was great to be back in person in the old council chambers. I would like to add my plaudits to everybody else who's already said them, to our staff. I already put y'all on Twitter tonight. We have the best staff of any elected officials in the city. They got us not only back into the old council chambers with clean carpets, but they got us into this space in a hybrid posture, which Vice President Thompson and I can tell you that when we came in here last week, sounded like flying to Mars. And instead tonight we were able to continue to engage with the public in the way that we have been able to for 2 years using Zoom, as well as to have people back in person and to be together. So thank you, all kudos to our staff. Thank you for sticking with us tonight. As a reminder to the viewing public, the State Board will continue to hold its meetings in person and in a hybrid posture, and we will convene next at our October 12th working session and our October 19th public meeting. The State Board will also be hosting a back-to-school engagement event in person at Eastern Senior High School at 10:30 a.m. on Saturday, September 24th. Members of the public can still sign up on our website and at bit.ly SBOE back2 school as well. One last public announcement. This Friday, our Advocacy and Outreach Committee is hosting a roundtable on sexual assault in our schools and information and data that we are seeking on instances of sexual assault and sexual abuse in our schools. You can find that meeting on our website, on our calendar of meetings, and we certainly invite members of the viewing public to watch that roundtable. With no further business before the State Board, I would now entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Dr. O'Leary is moving. Dr. Gasoy, would you like to second?
I was going to make a motion to adjourn, but after I reminded everybody about Eastern High School at 10 o'clock in the morning on Saturday.
All right. Thank you, Dr. O'Leary. We're excited to see you there. So Dr. O'Leary is motioning. Dr. Gasoy is seconding. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it, and this public meeting of the District of Columbia State Board of Education is adjourned at 10:02 p.m.